Today we continue on with our NHL offseason plan series. Today we look at the number 16th ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the St. Louis Blues. They're stuck right in the middle of the league. Will they go back into being a playoff contender next year? We'll discuss what moves we should expect to see if that can happen coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have another video here in our off-season plan series to take a look at today. Today we're in the middle point of the league from the regular season with the 16th ranked team, the St. Louis Blues, who unfortunately missed the playoffs last year. Of course, the 17th ranked team from the NHL's Washington Capitals, who we did most recently, they were a playoff team. Obviously, with the division structures and the conference structures the way it is, certainly, if the Blues had been in a different spot, they could have got in. It's kind of, odd to see that type of thing, but it does happen. So in case you're new to this series, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to recap some of the key team and individual stats from the Blues, analyze how the team changed throughout the course of the year. Then we're going to explore the offseason, look at their cap space, expiring contracts, restricted free agents, unrestricted free agents, look at what they have coming up for the 24 draft, and then what are the questions facing this franchise for the full season here. Obviously, there's going to be more things they're going to have to examine throughout the course of the year. We'll have to wait and see what those are. So let's first get into recapping last year for the St. Louis Blues. Of course, they finished with a record of 43, 33, and 6 for 92 points. They scored 234 goals, which was not a great result, 25th best in the league, while giving up 248, which is actually half decent, 15th best. So they were average for goals against, near the bottom of goals for. Power play was not overly great as well, only 18%, which is near the bottom of the league, while the 79.1% on the PK was 19th best. So special teams both could stand to get better. Goals for could stand to get better. On the defensive side of the puck, they were about an average team across the NHL. Looking at their top performers last year, they were led by Robert Thomas, who's been a nice player for them over the last number of years. Of course, he was still pretty young when they were winning the Stanley Cup back in 2018, but obviously since then has really taken on a bigger role and really evolved to be one of the leaders of the team. Finished first with 86 points last year. Jordan Kyrou, even though he didn't have a great start to the season, wasn't really thriving under Coach Craig Berube, did pick up the pace after we saw some changes there, and 31 goals is where he finished with 67 points. Kyrou and Thomas essentially are the leaders of this team now, and if they're going to run with these guys, they're going to have to, obviously, I think, maybe provide a little bit more secondary scoring and support for them for this team to take a step forward. Pavel Buchnevich continued to be one of those players who they can continue to rely on for consistency in offense as well. Put up 63 points. Newly appointed captain Braden Shen had 46. Brandon Saad last year had 42. We did see some in-season change, like I said. It didn't have a lot of movement within the roster outside of trading Robert Bortuzzo to the Islanders, which only generated a 7th-round pick. There really wasn't much in terms of roster, but they did make a coaching change, firing longtime coach Craig Berube after, I believe it was 5 years that he was there after taking over in the 18-19 season. Of course, winning the Stanley Cup as an interim head coach. And then we're at a point now where it's time for a new voice. Things were just not trending in the direction that Doug Armstrong wanted to see. So they appointed Drew Bannister at the time as the interim head coach for the remainder of the season. He actually finished with a decent record, fell short of the playoffs, but things did certainly seem to get better. Of course, Drew Bannister at that point was interim. Now he has been confirmed by the general manager, Doug Armstrong, to be the full-time permanent head coach of this team with a new contract in place. So we'll see how Drew Bannister does here moving forward. Goaltending last year was, I think, somewhat decent as well. Jordan Binnington finished with a record of 28, 21, and 5, a .913 save percentage, which is certainly pretty respectable, in a 2.84. Joel Hofer in a backup role put up a record of 15, 12, and 1, a .914 save percentage, and a .265 goals against. So you could argue Hofer's stats are a little bit better, but of course smaller sample size. I wouldn't call this elite level goaltending, but it was, I'd say, a little bit better than average, and it was good enough for sure. You see teams that are going into the playoffs with less than adequate goaltending league compared to these guys. So, we'll see what next year brings. But, they both had pretty decent seasons last year. Like I said, there wasn't a ton of change, and I don't know that we're going to see a ton more change this coming off season, but I do suspect that Armstrong would like to make some changes. So we'll see here how things go. From a cap perspective, they've got $15.6 million in space, and they do have 17 contracts on the books for next year. So that means they're going to be looking can have up to a 23-man roster. So that's potentially 6 players for that price tag. So that's certainly something you can work with. On the restricted free agent side, they only have Nikita Alexandrov and Scott Perunovich. So again, if they choose to retain those players, they're not guys that are going to command long-term deals or big money. So we could see 1 or 2 year deals for smaller amounts if they decide to retain their services, and I suspect there's a pretty good chance they would. On the unrestricted free agent side, you've got Sammy Blais, Kasperi Kapanen, Jakub Vrana, and Marco Scandella. Haven't confirmed through the media lately that they're all not going to be returning, but I think it's a possibility. I think Vrana, Scandella, and Kapanen probably for sure. Blais, I don't know. He's played better in St. Louis than anywhere else, but I know based on just how the whole year went, like I said, I wouldn't be shocked here if all 4 of those UFAs end up walking, which is going to cause the team to certainly be shopping a little bit. They can promote a little bit internally, but I can see them either a combination of making a couple of minor trades or free agent signings to kind of round out the roster. With some of the moves they've made over the past year or so, they have accumulated some extra draft picks. So they do have 9 picks going into the 2024 draft. They're picking 16th overall. So certainly, obviously they're going to get themselves a pretty good player. May not be somebody who's ready for the NHL right away. Probably looking at least 1 year, maybe 2, depends. We don't know that. A lot of players now going to U.S. college hockey route. Depends on if they're, how everything's going and where their development goes. But with the 9 picks, they do have multiple second-round picks as well as third-rounders as well. So they have their own 7, extra second, extra third. So could be a time we see some activity from Armstrong. I mean, they've had a lot of picks in the last couple of years. They have accumulated some good-looking prospects. They do have a decent prospect pool. Be curious to see how which of those guys might be able to jump up and be a part of the roster next year or get more of an opportunity for sure. Like we've seen Jake Neighbors be a prime example here, who's really developed and evolved into a pretty good player for them here since he was drafted. As far as the top questions facing this team in the offseason, obviously we know the head coaching situation, but there is still question marks around the staff of Drew Bannister. When I first started prepping for this video, that was around that time that we got confirmation that Bannister was going to be the full-time head coach for the coming year with the new contract, but who will be on his staff. So there's still some question marks there that they need to sort out, make sure they have the right guys in place to help run the PK and the power play, things of that nature. Some key players, though, are due for contract extensions, and I'll be curious to see how this works out. Pavel Buchnevich is one. He's been a good pickup since they traded for him from the New York Rangers a few years back. Real solid player. The Rangers didn't feel they could afford him, and they moved him, and we'll see how the Blues feel about him now. He can likely, again, ask for another raise. He's been pretty consistent. So will the Blues want to extend him, or will they? Because I'm sure they'll get offers. I have no doubt teams will call St. Louis about Buchnevich before the draft, before they can even sign an extension, to see what their plans are, because they'll be interested for sure. So they'll have options here. I suspect that probably odds are better than not that they sign and retain him, but I wouldn't say that's an absolute given. Joel Hofer and Jake Neighbors are both due extensions as well. Of course, Neighbors coming out of his ELC. And with Hofer, I would say that he's earned himself a decent little raise for sure. He's been good. I do wonder the future of Jordan Binnington. I know that where he won a Stanley Cup with the Blues, there's a lot that the fan base that I've seen seems to be convinced that they wouldn't trade him, but there was some speculation that his name was out there. Obviously, at some point, you have to give your next goaltender an opportunity to kind of run with things, and Hofer is it seems like he's more than ready. I mean, he's put in his time in the minors. He's got some time in the NHL, and all of his stats check out. At some point, you have to let him kind of run with things. Binnington still has a few more years left at $6 million. So I don't think it's a given that Binnington goes. I think they'd probably be fine coming back with the two next year as their goalie tandem. But I do wonder if that's a possibility of something we might see this year, this summer. We'll have to wait and see, because I think with the goaltending market the way it is, I'm sure they'll at least get some interest, but hard to say. I know they've been wanting to change the D for a while. I think Parayko is one of the guys that they probably would prefer to keep, so you're probably looking at, between Krug, Falk, or Leddy. I think one of those guys, if they can, because they've given them all trade protection in their contracts. They tried to trade Torrey Krug last year, and he blocked it with his no move. So, again, I would suspect Doug Armstrong will have some conversations and will try, but might prove very, very challenging. I would think that Krug's probably the preferred guy again, but hard to say what he'll end up working out there. But he wants to change up the dynamic on the back end, but it's his own fault. He's been the GM there a long time, and he's negotiated all these contracts. So to me, he's given some of these guys too much trade protection, when I think that should be reserved for the absolute top players. But I've been preaching that for years, and NHL GMs and teams don't seem to agree with me on that standpoint. So we'll see. But a potential goaltending trade, I don't know how likely that is, but at some point, it's if Hofer keeps it up, will likely happen. And then a D trade if Armstrong can pull it off, for sure. Certainly, there could be some changes to the forward group as well, depending on what they do with Buchnevich. Is there going to be interest in a guy like Brendan Saad? I don't know, right? There's going to be some internal debate on what to do here. Like I said, this team hasn't been quite good enough for the playoffs, but at the same time, I don't know that they really feel the need to rebuild. I think they've got enough guys that are on the younger side of things, and with enough experience now that they can probably retool on the fly. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Doug Armstrong attempt to be busy with some trades. It's just going to be really challenging given the contracts and trade protection that he's kind of put himself in that predicament. But they do have lots of cap space, so I do think they're going to be a team that could be busy. There's no doubt. I mean, they do have okay depth down the middle. Like they want to change the dynamic on the back end if they can, and maybe some more scoring from the wings. But they need to score more goals. There's no doubt. And I suspect one of Drew Bannister's biggest challenges is going to be to bring out more of that skill in Jordan Kyrou. I think he can help him hopefully take things up another level. If you can get Kyrou up to maybe 40 goals and get him to be a little bit more comparable with Thomas, then that might be something that will help the team too. So we'll see what happens. The Blues will be busy if possible, but again, I don't know that we're going to see a ton of activity. A lot of maybes with this team, but because of all the trade protection, it's just really difficult to say exactly what we're going to see. But there's at the very least going to be some turnover, at least 3 or 4 spots for sure. Let me know your thoughts on the Blues and the expectations down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.